All right, here's two quadratic equations that we're asked to solve. First off, if it's quadratic, I want to make it equal to 0. This one's already there, so we're good. Now I try and factor it, and you can factor it using the AC method, or you can factor by guess and check. I'm just going to try guess and check. So with guess and check, what you do is you split this up. So you'd have a 5c and a c here. And I know that because if I multiply those, I get 5c squared. And then I split the 28 up. Well, 28 you can write as 28 times 1, or you can write it as 4 times 7, 14 times 2, lots of options. I usually pick the two numbers that are closer together and just try them. So I'm going to try and put a 4 here and a 7 there. Since both these signs are positive, it means both of these are positive. And now let's multiply it. So 5c squared, yeah, I know I get that. 5 times 7 is positive 35. I look up top and I only have a 27 there. So I'm thinking I chose the wrong spot for those. Let me change them. So let's try the 4 here and the 7 there. Okay, 5c squared plus 20c plus 7c. Yeah, there I'm going to get the 27 plus 28. So this factorization that I did here is correct. So once I know that I factored it correctly, now I can use the 0 property that says anything times anything, if it's equal to 0, then I have two solutions. One of them is A is 0 and one is B is 0. So here I've got two factors, so I can say either 5c plus 7 equals 0, or c plus 4 is equal to 0. And then I just solve each of those equations. So I'll subtract 7 on both sides, and then I'll divide both sides by 5. On this one, I'll subtract 4 on each side. Okay? Now, to check to see if you're right, you can take this number and plug it back in everywhere you see a c and see if it comes out to 0. That would be a good way to check it. You could also graph this. If it's quadratic, you could graph it. And when you graph it, you'd want to look for a place where it crosses the x-axis. I think this one will probably look something like that. And just tap on that point on decimals to see if it's -4 and to see if this other point is a -7/5. You could do that. So here's another question, very similar one. So I have v squared v, but this time it's not equal to 0. So I'm going to take and I'll subtract 48 on this side and 48 on this side. So I have 20v squared minus 16v minus 48 is equal to 0. Now on the last question I didn't do this just because I visually checked and you couldn't. But on any time where you're going to factor something, because I want to make this something times something equals 0, and then I'll set each of those to 0. But what you want to look for is to see if you could divide every one of those terms by a similar number. And it looks like you can divide them all by 4. So I'm going to do that. I'll divide this by 4, and this by 4, and this by 4, and this by 4. You got to do everything. So this will turn out to be 5v squared minus 4v minus 12 equals 0 divided 4 is still 0. Okay, now same as the last question, I need to factor that. Let me show you how to use the AC method. AC method, you take that and multiply it by that. So this is AC method. The one I did on the last question was guess and check. So the AC method, you multiply this A by this C. So you get -60. So you want to get two numbers that multiply to a -60, and those same numbers need to add to a -4. Okay, so let's try, 12 times 5. But when you subtract those, and this says that they have to have different signs. That's what that minus there is. So if one's minus, one's plus, you're getting a negative 7 or a positive 7. That doesn't work. 10 times 6. Again, oh no, that one has a difference of 4. So I could have a positive 10 and a negative 6, or a negative 10 and a positive 6. I need to get a negative 4, so it needs to be this one. Now, I don't just put those in the bracket. What I do is I take those numbers and replace this minus 4v with them. So I'll write down 5v squared minus 10v plus 6v. See, I'm replacing that one with these numbers. And I include whatever letters there. Minus 12 equals 0. Now I can group factor. So I'll group those two, and I'll group those two. I can factor out a 5v of this one, and that'll be v minus 2. This one I can factor out a 6, a plus 6, and it'll be v minus 2. Since these are the same, I can keep going. So I'll factor the v minus 2 out, and I'll be left with 5v plus 6 equals 0. Now I have the 0 property multiplying, so either v minus 2 is going to be equal to 0, or 5v plus 6 is going to be equal to 0. Adding 2 on both sides gives me an answer of 2. Here, if I subtract 6 on both sides, and then divide both sides by 5, I get that. So those are my two answers. Let me maybe try and show you, I don't know if I'll be able to, on Desmos how you could check that. Let me insert a browser. Let's go to desmos.com. Okay, graphing calculator, here we go. So, where's my thing? Here we go. 20v squared. All right. So I want to go 20. 20. And instead of a v, I'm going to use x. I think that they allow you to do a v, but I'm going to use x because it's right there. Minus 16x minus 48. Minus 48. So I want to check to see where those lines cross. One crosses at 2, and one crosses at minus 1.2. What do we get? 2 and minus 1.2. Okay, we got the 2, and I'll bet if you divide that, you get a negative 1.2. Now, another way that you can check that with Desmos is plug in your answers. Into that function. Let me try. So I'm going to put 20, and then instead of the x there, I'm going to put one in one of my answers, which was 2. So I'll put a 2 in there, squared, minus 16. I got to put another 2 in there, and then minus 48. And what I want to get is 0. Sure enough, it's 0. The other answer I had was 6 over 5, wasn't it? Let's try that. 6 divide 5 in there. And right here, 6 divide 5. Oh, maybe it was minus 6 over 5. I'll put a minus in there. Okay, minus. And this one's a minus. There, now it comes out to 0. I'd forgotten the minus. Okay, so there's two ways you could check your answer. Hopefully that helps you with those two questions.